But you know, the judicial system, think about the judicial system. Of course, one of the very worst rulings ever by the Supreme Court has been the Roe versus Wade decision. And we're still suffering from that. Not only was it a wrong ruling, they shouldn't have even ruled on it. It was a piece of legislation. It had to do with medical technology and medical information, what you could do in a first trimester, a second trimester, and a third trimester, and legalizing abortion for the whole country. I mean, it just was totally bizarre. Now, my approach to that, without going into overly deep details, because I want to get some questions, is that I have a bill in called the Sanctity of Life bill. And it's something that could address this subject quickly. It's not a constitutional amendment, and we don't have to wait to change the Supreme Court and wonder how they're going to rule after we appoint them. This is something that could be done by majority vote in the Congress with the signature of the President. It deals with the jurisdiction. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to restrict jurisdiction of certain things to the federal courts. And this would eliminate the ability to go into a federal court dealing with abortion laws and right to life laws. So if the state of New Hampshire had a law that said there'd be no abortion, tomorrow, if it were to be passed, it couldn't go into a federal court. And yet we have gotten so little support for this concept. It seems like there are some even working in our own pro-life communities. It seems like they want to perpetuate this and keep it going and say, well, we're going to work on the judicial system and getting rid of the judges, and we're going to have a constitutional amendment. But we can still work on that, but we ought to do what's easy and proper and has been made available to us by strictly by doing this through a piece of legislation. So I can guarantee you, if I were to be the president, if I'm to be the president, I would be very anxious and very willing not only to encourage this law to be passed, but I'd be very proud to sign a piece of legislation like that. I want to touch on two subjects very briefly, and then we'll go to questions. We have a crisis in the economic system too. The excessive spending and all the military spending going on, all the domestic spending, the deficits we're running up, and all the borrowing. We're dependent on China today. But our dollar is in a crisis. But that is an economic issue. It's a constitutional issue, but it's a moral issue too. The Bible is very clear about honesty and weights and measures. And when we violate that, we get ourselves into trouble. All governments and all countries have done this. It's a generally over the many centuries, governments have abused the monetary standard. It's more sophisticated now and more pervasive. So if we allow the legalization of counterfeiting, that's what we're dealing with. All of us would go to jail if we did what the government is doing to us, because they're counterfeiting the money. They're devaluing the currency. And just 2 weeks ago, when Bernanke was before the committee, I said, you are deliberately depreciating the currency, which means you're deliberately lowering your interest rates, and the people who are savers lose money on this. You depreciate the currency. It's a tax. You steal the value from the people who save. So it's very much a moral issue. And of course, when we allow a Federal Reserve, which is very secretive, to print money out of thin air, it allows governments to grow and destroy our liberties. So that's part of it as well as the subject that when you inflate a currency, you cause a business cycle, you cause bubbles to form and then to burst. That's why we're in the midst of a housing crisis today. But the ultimate test on this issue is the dollar bubble, and it's cracking. It is leaking severely right now, and I think they're going to have trouble holding the dollar together. We were able to hold it together in 1979 and 1980 with interest rates of 21%, but I think it's going to be more difficult. So we as a country have to be prepared for that.